Welcome to the Geek Homeworld. I am your host, SavageTechman. We talk sci-fi, TV, movies, superheroes, and all from a geek perspective. You can find us on Blogger, Google+, Twitter, Facebook. We're everywhere. Join the Geek Homeworld. Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the Geek Homeworld. I'm Ed, and I'm joined again this week by Cheryl.
Hello.
She has been cooking up some kind of surprise for all you lovely people out there in this Valentine's edition of the podcast, and I'm not really sure if I'm going to like this. What are you up to?
Well, in tribute to Valentine's Day, I've decided that I am going to put together a list for the ladies on the eligibility of our heroes from the Marvel movie universe. Now, everyone on this planet, and in the local solar system at least, already knows that given my choice of any Marvel character, I would happily run away with Loki. He is magically delicious, so bright and misunderstood, and I just love how clever he is. And if you look at his childhood, he's kind of justified in everything that he does. He's really trying to do the right thing.
Is he?
He just goes about it the wrong way. And in fact, criminal defense attorney Joe Shore, or Sir, I'm not sure how to say his name, wrote on the Law and Multiverse blog that Loki is criminally insane. So he's not to be responsible for his deeds. He suffers from what Joe calls a grandiose delusional disorder. And you can lay a lot of blame for that on his stepdaddy or adopted daddy, Odin. And since his adopted mom's death, Loki could really use someone like me who understands him and someone who could help him with the burden of his glorious purpose. I can get down with a bit of grandiose delusion myself.
You're definitely sounding delusional. Maybe you should be dreaming about relationships with psychopaths?
Well, yeah, I probably should be a little bit more careful with my own mental health if I'm burgeoning on grandiose delusions of my own. So,
somewhat.
All right, so I'll stick to the good guys. And in this case, if all things were equal, I would definitely choose Dr. Bruce Banner as my top fella.
Don't make him angry.
Well, you know, Thor and Captain America are downright flawlessly gorgeous. But Chris Hemsworth and Chris Evans are just too pretty boy perfect for me. So I need a man with a little more edge, so Dr. Banner is that guy for me. And he's smart, he's sensitive, he's Mark Ruffalo, and he's really trying to get in touch with his feelings. He has to work harder than everyone else just to keep it together every day.
So why don't you just pick him up and be done with it then?
Well, you know, all things aren't equal. And so here's my truly, truly biased list of the most eligible men in the Avengers.
Okay. I'm very interested to hear this because you're always coming up with things that I would have never thought of. And why don't you start at the bottom of your list? Who is the least eligible superhero?
Actually, this is pretty easy. The least eligible is Hawkeye. Jeremy Renner certainly has a definite appeal, and what lady could resist a man with that kind of aim? Unfortunately, in Age of Ultron, we learned that he has a wife and 2.5 kids.
Wow.
So, way to take yourself off the hottie hero market in a big way. Sorry, Mr. Barton, but this makes you the least eligible on my list.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're not hanging on to that you are hanging on to some of your morals. You won't date a married man. Perhaps this is a good time for me to remind you that you are a married woman and you're married to a superhero. That's still called adultery, I think.
Whatever. Well, you know, it's just all in good fun. They're not real. You know that, right?
Really?
So my next least eligible is my not-so-secret crush, the Incredible Hulk. Really not secret because I just told you so.
True.
Like you said, I already said he's got everything I'm looking for, but Age of Ultron also crossed him off my list. I mean, it's clear very clear that Black Widow has already staked her claim on that territory, and there is absolutely no way I am messing with her.
Very wise. No one should mess with Black Widow.
So, the next on my list, on the way to the number one hero to take home to your parents, I would place Iron Man. He's never going to make it to the top of my list. Loki may be delusional, but Tony Stark is downright troubled. I don't mind a wisecracker. I've got a pretty tough tongue myself, and I could go toe-to-toe with him just like Pepper Potts. But he's far too moody. He needs some serious meds. Plus, he needs a lot of caretaking, even though he thinks he's got it together and he's self-contained. For frickin' sake, he's got a full-time staff just to keep him going. None of the other guys has to depend on Jarvis to get him up in the morning and tell him where to go and what to wear. Plus, poor Pepper, she runs herself ragged just for his sake. No worries, Pepper. You can keep Iron Man all to yourself.
But if you choose Iron Man, I can take Pepper. Maybe I can consider these ideas after all.
That's a pretty good reason that I'm not going to choose Iron Man. After all, I don't really like that idea. So that brings me to the only god on the list, Thor.
Yay, Thor.
He's strong. He's definitely loyal when he falls in love, but he's totally clueless. I mean, he can't even send Jane a text to ask her how he's doing. They tell him that she's safe, and even though he hasn't seen her in forever, he's totally cool with just going about his business and fighting the bad guys. I mean, of course, the main reason that I couldn't hitch myself to Thor is because family dinners would be so awkward. You know, if there I'd be sitting next to Thor and he would be absolutely adoring me. And in the meantime, all my attention would be focused across the table at Loki. We'd be playing footsie, and you can just imagine how Loki would love to steal his brother's chick. So for the sake of Asgard and Midgard and every other guard, I can't put Thor at the top of the hottie hero list.
So, let's see. That leaves the truly all-American hero, Captain America.
Exactly. He's strong and sensitive like the Hulk, which I like, but without the emotional ups and downs. He's not breaking out green every time he gets a little upset. And he always tries to do the right thing, even when it's hard. And he's genuinely interested in others. He pays attention. He looks great in spandex. He's a fantastic friend, even though Iron Man doesn't think so. Most importantly, his girlfriend is like 100 years old now. And
so he won't pop the question, but he'll settle down.
I don't.
Of course, he was on ice for 70-something years.
I don't have to worry about her because, well, you know, I wouldn't mess with Peggy Carter in her prime. I'm really not too worried about her now that she's in the nursing home.
Wow.
In fact, Steve and I can visit her together, and I'll let her tell me all about her glory days. And while I casually mix in not so innocent new innuendos about all that time she spent with Tony Stark's dad, and then Cap will be all like, "Ooh, I never thought about that," and he'll be more in love with me than ever, and he'll start to forget about his love for Peggy, and, you know, just that kind of thing. So, happy Valentine's Day to my darling Steve. I will see you in the theaters in May, and I know you're going to put that bratty Tony Stark in his place and send him crying back to Pepper.
You know, actually, I thought I was your superhero.
Well, you're no Loki.
Geek Homeworld Review Preview.
Since I'm in such a Valentine's Day mood, I want to talk about love. That is, love for my new favorite show, Marvel's Agent Carter. And there is so much here to love. I mean, wit, action, smarts, fun. It's got a cheerful color palette that kind of matches the updated attitude of the time setting. And this year's location is in Hollywood, which is fun. It has serious themes, but it's not dark like all of the DC series that are currently airing, which I don't enjoy. Plus, I'm really falling in love with the idea of these mini seasons. It's so much less commitment. And again, if you're going to watch them all at once, it's a whole lot easier to binge watch just a few shows, in this case 10 for this season, than it is to try to catch up on a full season or 2 or 3 full seasons. You can watch Agent Carter both seasons in one weekend, really. So it's love without commitment, and what's better than that? So the only problem is that there is so often so much time between the series when you have these short series, but For instance, with Agent Carter, we had to wait 11 months from February to January between the first season and this new second season. And that is probably going to be the case again if, and that's a big if, we're lucky enough to get the third season. But I'll come back to that in a minute. This season has, I think, a lot more pizzazz than the last season. And this is largely due to the continuing expansion, I think, of Edwin Jarvis's character. We get to see a lot more facets to him, and his sort of urbane demeanor is undercut by his uncharacteristic things you wouldn't think he'd be interested in that he's doing, like his physical fitness routine, and he tries to get Agent Carter to fight with him. And plus this year we do get to meet his wife, and this is the woman that he risked everything for. Her name is Anna, and it was because of her that he is unquestionably devoted to Howard Stark, who helped get her out of Europe when they were in danger. And so although he maintains a stiff upper lip about Howard's playboy exploits, it's really kind of fun to watch him be uncomfortable with the world around him. And yet he's still so gung-ho for the adventure of it all. And so this year it's kind of like a cast of misfits when you see them all come together. I'm less charmed by the ongoing insights into Peggy Carter's love life. I mean, last season she had this kind of interest in one of the other guys, and that romantic partner from last season inexplicably has moved on to find a new love, and who I really think she should turn out to be a bad guy, but so far she's squeaky clean and super boring. And, well, I guess his change of heart is not technically inexplicable because he lamely explains it by saying some cruddy thing about New York seeming so far away once he had gotten on the West Coast. Like, they totally had telephones back then, so that's really, really super lame. Then we have this new character who's this handsome and brilliant African-American scientist, and Peggy seems to have gotten quite smitten with him very quickly. And I'm not sure how I feel about this, just because I don't care about the romance. I just think romance in the show is a waste of time. Let's get to the humor. Let's get to the action. Besides, shouldn't she still be pining for Captain America? I mean, he's not been gone that long. And sure, she should get to have some fun, but really, she should just focus on her job. There are a lot of bad guys out there. This season, Peggy gets another female adversary, Whitney Frost, who is based on an original character from the books. And I'm sure we'll eventually get to see a great fight scene between the two of them. But right now, Whitney is too busy absorbing people and obsessing over nuclear bombs. We get a good bit of Peggy's backstory and Whitney's backstory, and naturally, it is bad parenting, as always, that's led Whitney to her evil ways. So parents, be careful, or you're going to create a Marvel bad guy. Meanwhile, Peggy seems to be constantly losing the men she cares about. In this case, the death of her brother is what led her to finally get her hiney into gear and stop being a stereotypical woman of the 1940s and become a butt-kicking secret agent. And then, of course, she loses Kat later. So if you're the dude in her life, watch out, scientist guy, because they tend to have bad things happen to them. So the show is pushing the boundaries of race and gender roles as they existed during that time. There were very few women in the intelligence business back in that day, and probably even fewer highly placed black scientists, and very, very few Hollywood starlets who had a brain for invention like Whitney does. It's not that the characters in Agent Carter are anachronistic, really. It's just that these characters and their attitudes represent exceptions to the rules of that day. So World War II did have a number of female spies, particularly those in the French Resistance. And part of the reason that they could be incredibly successful was because no one expected a woman to be a spy. And this was still a point in history when many thought that women and children were better seen and not heard. Peggy Carter particularly makes me think of New Zealander Nancy Wake, and she found herself behind enemy lines. She'd been working in Germany as a reporter, I think, when the war started, and she ended up joining the French Resistance. And another spy said, "She is the most feminine woman I know until the fighting starts. Then she's like 5 men," and that certainly is like Peggy Carter. Dr. Jason Wilkes, meanwhile, bears a strong resemblance to Harvard microbiologist Dr. Harold Ames, A World War II Quartermaster's Corps veteran and a Fulbright scholar, he began his career on the faculty of Harvard's medical school in the 1950s, at a time when many African Americans were seriously struggling just to get a decent elementary school education. And he excelled in microbiology, as I said, as well as molecular physics, earning many prestigious awards throughout his long career. So, maybe they drew inspiration for Dr. Wilkes from Dr. Amos. And our villain, Whitney Frost, also actually has a direct counterpart from the time period. World War II pinup girl Hedy Lamarr was more than just a pretty face. She was actually very brilliant. And while her photos were carried around by soldiers during the war and taped above sailors' bunks, she was using her brains to contribute more significantly to the war effort. Having already created a number of other inventions and patents, she decided to solve the problem of these easily jammed weapons guidance signals that were in use at that time. And so she developed a frequency changing system that would hawk the signal across frequencies to prevent others from interfering with, the course of torpedoes. And she had it patented in 1942, so she did this just a year after the war started. And the military initially rejected her idea. Apparently, they don't like ideas that they don't come up with themselves. But 2 decades later, in the 1960s, they did adopt it. And many of today's common wireless systems, like cell phones and Bluetooth and even GPS, are derived from that frequency hopping invention of hers. So you can thank a Hollywood starlet for that cell phone that you're holding right now. So while all of these characters aren't really misplaced in the time period, Agent Carter is still pushing the edges of common attitudes of that day. But I think this helps make the show more palatable. We think poorly of the characters who display racist or misogynistic behaviors, and we certainly couldn't have our heroes behaving that way. So when they stand up against it, we cheer for that, and we want the bullies to be pushed back. So they do that. For me, Agent Carter is a complete entertainment package. It's fun without being silly. It's full of action without being full of gory violence. Seems like everything's getting so violent lately. And it helps fill in some of the story of what happened after World War II, but before the Avengers in the Marvel Universe. And if it continues, we may really get to see the birth of S.H.I.E.L.D. and with Hydra coiled within it. But as I said, that really is a big if. Rumors in the last few days are really spinning. Not only has ABC condensed the schedule for the current season, deciding to air 2 back-to-back episodes this week and 2 back-to-back episodes next week, so that the season is going to end on March 1st. Additionally, it's been announced that the series star, Haley Atwell, is taking on the lead role in a new full-series program called Conviction, which is some kind of legal drama. Ratings this season have not been great. In fact, the second season premiere garnered less than half of the audience of the first season, and the viewership has been dropping steadily each week. In fact, pretty much since the beginning, every single week the viewership has been less than the week before. And Marvel really has gotten used to being super successful, and they also have plenty of content that can be developed, so they don't need to waste their time on a show that's not getting viewers. So if Agent Carter can't carry its own weight, it'll soon be gone. If you enjoy this show, do what you can to save it. Definitely tune in this week and check out the previous episodes as well, because I'm afraid without that significant audience shift, the next time we'll be seeing Agent Carter is when Captain America visits her in the retirement home. For me, the Marvel Universe just wouldn't be the same without her.
Geek Homeworld Review Preview.
I got to go see Deadpool to sold-out crowds. I saw it in the Big D. It was even more awesome. You don't need to see it in IMAX or whatever, but what a great movie. Deadpool is going to usher in more R-rated movies from Marvel. I can definitely see that. This gives me hope for another Blade movie. You remember the Blade trilogy we had? Blade being the half-human, half-vampire hero there, and Wesley Snipes pretty much owned that role in one of the first big Marvel movies before 2000's X-Men really kicked everything into high gear. But I would love to see even Wesley Snipes make an appearance or come back in that. And with everything going on with vampires and zombies still popular, I could definitely see another Blade movie. That would be awesome. So Deadpool open to anywhere from, I think, 130 to 135 million. The final numbers aren't in at this time. And that surpassed even the greatest box office expectations. They were talking maybe 65 to 70 million were some of the projections for just the domestic box office, and it's done in that range in around 200-ish million worldwide opening weekend. That's pretty amazing. And I tell you what, it got an A score from Rotten Tomatoes and 100% certified fresh. I mean, that may be as good as The Force Awakens, actually maybe even better. Deadpool, this was the perfect incarnation of it. I tell you, Ryan Reynolds, just like Deadpool, has resurrected his career. Ryan Reynolds last appeared in the disastrous Green Lantern movie, even though I enjoyed it somewhat, but the fans did not take to Green Lantern, and that's pretty much been a bad stigma on Ryan Reynolds' career, and most of the movies he's played in since then haven't done that well at all. And before he appeared in Green Lantern, he did play Deadpool in X-Men Origins Wolverine, and an interpretation of the character that was not in line with the comics or to the liking of any of the fans. I always remember that movie and just, this isn't the Deadpool I've heard about, and at that time I didn't know as much about Deadpool, but it was definitely not the traditional Deadpool that we wanted to see, and this is definitely, in this movie interpretation, I say, as much as Hugh Jackman owns the role of Wolverine, I will now say that Ryan Reynolds owns the role of Deadpool. And we do know Hugh Jackman's about to retire from the role of Wolverine, and hopefully Ryan Reynolds has got a long stint. We already know that Deadpool 2 is coming, and there was a wonderfully big tease at the end, and I should have called spoiler alert on this if I hadn't already. But there was a major tease at the end, and they did a play of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, if you haven't seen that, and I can't imagine why you hadn't. But they teased one of my all-time favorite characters, Cable, and Cable will appear for the first time on the big screen in Deadpool 2, the sequel, so they confirmed it there. And if you don't know about Cable, we've definitely got an episode you can look at based upon Cable and how he played into the Apocalypse saga. But Cable's the time-traveling, techno-organic, virus-infected son of Scott Summers, or Cyclops, and Madeline Pryor, which was a clone of Jean Grey. And Cable is the main adversary of Apocalypse, and of course, we saw the new trailers recently for X-Men Apocalypse, which I am super excited about this year, along with Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice, and in less than a month, we'll be seeing that and loving that and talking more and more about that. But we'll be talking also about the next Deadpool movie, the next movie that's got Cable in it. I'm so excited. Cable's one of my all-time favorite characters, not just from the comics, but in the 1996 version of X-Men from Fox Kids TV that Stan Lee still had a part in back then in the 90s. Great version of Cable, and that's the Cable I want to see on TV. One of the actors, the older gentleman with the gray hair, and I don't know his name right now, is in the lead, or at least the fans want to see him play Cable, and he kind of looks it with a goatee and such, and gray hair, but he's the general or whatever from Avatar. I don't know how likely that is to happen, but I'm on board. Anything to bring Cable to the big screen. And I really want to see Cable make some kind of appearance in X-Men Apocalypse. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but that would be awesome. So, with that being said, Ryan Reynolds is already pushing for an X-Force movie, and he wants it to be R-rated. And Cable, was the leader of X-Force, so I'm all in for all of that. So we shall definitely see what's coming with Deadpool 2. And Deadpool definitely breaks the fourth wall. And I really think it puts some of the the zaniness of this movie, as much as Guardians of the Galaxy pushed humor, Deadpool just blew the top off of it. It just another completely greater level. If you have not seen Deadpool, you need to rush to the theater and go check it out. Very R-rated. I saw a bunch of kids being run out the theater. I hadn't seen that in a while in an R-rated movie, but the theater patrons were chasing kids off that were trying to see this movie. And the shows we went to were sold out, and we were able to get into the big D version of it. But definitely go check out Deadpool. It's a big success, and this movie's going to have legs on it. It's, so to speak, even though most of that got blown off and different things. Though there's so many incarnations. The humor, Ryan Reynolds, his humor is just dead on. This is just a perfect adaptation, or as close as we can get, to Deadpool. So if you haven't gone to see Deadpool yet, go and see it. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Geek Homeworld podcast with your host, SavageTechman. You can find us on Libsyn, Google+, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, listen to us on iTunes, see us on YouTube, be part of our Mixler chats. Thank you. See you again on the Geek Homeworld podcast.
Geek Homeworld.